Africa has the best weather in the world. Okay? There is no region in the world that enjoys a fair weather than Sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, people from the West flock to Sub-Saharan Africa to enjoy tropical and equatorial weather, which you don't find in the West. Sub-Saharan Africa, by the grace of God, has been spared, thunderous global calamity, hurricanes, typhoons, earthquakes. We don't get them in Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay? Sub-Saharan Africa is the region most blessed with the precious minerals under the sun. If you go to the Congo, if you go to South Africa, if you go to the Kalahari, there's no region in the world that is blessed with the precious minerals like Sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, Sub-Saharan Africa also has very friendly people. So I'll summarize the good things about Sub-Saharan Africa into four: our people, our weather, our physical features, and our systems.
Despite the stabilization of the sub-Saharan African economy, the gap between the rich and the poor is still enormous. The multinational corporations that advise and subtly influence the economy should be responsible for the bridging of this gap.
That's the objective. It's really to reduce poverty by promoting growth, and there's still a lot to do in this area. I think there's a lot of optimism concerning Sub-Saharan Africa these days, but we know that the growth that we've witnessed in the last 10 years still needs to be more inclusive. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of reducing poverty, in terms of creating jobs for the youth, in terms of creating a bigger formal sector, moving from low value added exports to high value added exports. So there's a lot of optimism, but there is still a very full work agenda for the future.
Until recently, even the very agricultural resources which we heavily depend on had rarely seen any improvements. The direction Sub-Saharan Africa has taken with agriculture can be seen. The non-governmental organizations have done their role in instituting reforms that have contributed to this growth. Despite the challenges that Sub-Saharan has gone through, looking at the global economic indicators, there is no place that has better economic prospects in the world right now than Sub-Saharan Africa. It is also important to note that this will depend on how well these prospects are nurtured and protected.
How big is our contribution in the international system as far as our goods are concerned? China has all of a sudden become an economic powerhouse just because they're really producing, and eventually they have just turned into political hegemony. So it starts from our economics. If we get our economics right, then it will become easier for us to have a place, and not just a place, but a recognizable place in the international system as Africa. And I think that's what the new Pan-Africanism should be about. It's no longer about liberation. It was good. Liberation was good, but right now what we should be looking at is empowerment, and not looking outward per se, because we have had aid for a long time, and we can have the conversation about aid for long. Pro aid and anti-aid, the debate is long, but we have, as I mentioned earlier, we've just got to begin producing and trading within ourselves. Buying Africa, producing Africa, buying Africa. That way we build our economy and we get clout in the international systems as Africa.
That policies have to be put in place for growth to be more inclusive, and for public funds to reach those who need them most. For instance, by cutting down on subsidies that benefit everyone, and in fact, tend to really subsidize the consumption of those that are already well off, and replacing those blanket subsidies by well-targeted social policies, by well-directed cash transfers, by investing more in primary and secondary education, by investing more in the provision of health in rural areas. We still have to move fast on this front. Poverty reduction is also a gradual process. What we're seeing, for instance, in Kenya now, is that we have an emerging middle class. Okay, and we're seeing greater access to credit with new products such as M-Pesa and M-Kesho.
Which is critical.
That we are seeing these developments that will eventually create a society that is more inclusive, that can help generate jobs and opportunities for the poorest. But I think it's a valid point that you raise. We need to move faster on this front, and the resources that can be generated for the government through faster economic growth need to be channeled into the social sectors so that we tackle head-on the issue of poverty.
The one most important factor in Africa is the green untapped economic potential and Africa's natural wealth and mineral resources. This wealth has been stolen for decades, yet it looks like it can never be depleted. Another important factor is that 65% of African untapped agricultural and mineral land does not need recycling or reinvestment. It is all fresh and untapped. This therefore to prove that sub-Saharan Africa cannot be ignored anymore. Any brilliant investor who sees the future for the growth of his capital would not waste any time in putting his money in the right place, sub-Saharan Africa. It is almost in daily news that there are minerals being discovered in different parts of sub-Saharan Africa, the recent being the discovery of oil reserves in the Turkana North region in the northeastern part of Kenya, a land that has been ignored for years by the Kenyan government and businessmen.
And this is why, as an institution, we want to work with the treasuries in order to ensure that the fiscal regime is designed in a way that it enables the state to capture as much revenue as possible of those activities without deterring the foreign investors from coming in. So it's really finding the right balance between generating revenues for the country and preserving the incentives for foreign companies to come in to exploit these natural resources. And once that revenue comes into the Treasury's coffers, make sure that they are that they go to the right priorities. And that comes through our discussions on the budgets, on the priority sectors, on policies such as directed cash transfers, social protection mechanisms. So that's how it all works in practice.
It is also important to mention here that no foreigner should be allowed to invest and take profits back at the loss and suffering of the locals. The locals have to share the wealth discovered in their soil, and it should be used to promote the locals' talents and improve their lifestyles. The trickle-down mechanisms have to be laid down well before any business engagements are made.
The thing I would say is I really hope that all over the continent here, that whatever they do for political or economic, social structures that they're trying to forge and just start or continue or just plain create, that it's Africanized and not taken as a cookie cutter approach with the Western model and then implanted here, because it won't work sustainably. Because the historical context of how it came about in the West is so different than here, that if it's not indigenously sprung,
it might cause a problem.
It will. So I'm just hoping that whatever is done is Africanized, not absorbed from the West and dropped down here and instituted.
One of the most effective ways of distributing wealth is through the growth of small-medium enterprises, SMEs, and the cooperative movement. The growth of small-medium enterprises has been the fueling factor for the growth of the banking system and ultimately the economy of the region. They say that China has experienced a faster economic growth because of cheap labor. It is only fair to point out that there is no other place in the world where there is cheap, skilled yet untapped labor other than sub-Saharan Africa, twice the Chinese population. This same workforce offers the greatest untapped market.
But I think also, if you consider the outlook for Africa, it's completely different from that of advanced economies, whether it's in Europe or Japan or in the United States. If you simply look at the population trends, Africa has a growing population. Africa has a growing middle class. Its emerging middle class is expanding very fast, and that will sustain the pension system, the consumption of the economies, basically creating much stronger domestic demand, creating stronger savings and investments. So the outlook is quite different for Africa and the advanced economies. And Africa is in a very good position to benefit from its continued and deepened integration into world trade.
For any country, region or continent, nothing is as important as the development of the human capital. There is no area in Africa that has seen tremendous improvement than that of acquisition of skills for labor.
So, when you look at the growth of higher education, I get a little annoyed sometimes because I sit on an FKE board and people forget higher education is a major economic determinant. When you look at the cost of education, even in this country, and the number of universities that are out there now, and the number of young people and older people who are looking to be educated, it's a significant industry in this country and throughout this region, actually.
The biggest gift from the colonialists to sub-Saharan Africa, although received with mixed reactions, has been the gift of education. The development of schools and colleges in sub-Saharan Africa has led to the creation of intellectual mindsets. These mindsets have acquired skills and embraced innovation, two major factors that have developed this part of the region.
So some of the things I think that have occurred and across continents is that many countries are now looking at having a national qualifications framework. And Kenya has worked on a national qualifications framework that helps to identify equivalencies across these various different educational systems so that you can equate what goes on in a Burundi educational system with what goes on in Kenya, so that when a student leaves, for example, maybe form or has taken O-levels, they can then come into the Kenyan system. But if they want to go from the Kenyan system into a Ugandan system, then they'll have to take like a prep course in order to have the equivalent of an A-level. So there are things like that have gone on that have also highlight the fact that the systems are becoming more flexible and are becoming a lot more sensitive to students transitioning from, for example, a diploma into a degree. In the past, that didn't happen. But now, they see that the people who have diplomas can transfer some of those units into higher education and not have to start all over again. So there's been a lot of change over the years, and since I've been here, since '94. Interview employers, and I think this is around the globe, they talk about basically two types of skills they want their graduates to have. One, of course, is in the disciplinary. They'd ideally like for you to report on the job and be ready to go. Of course, it requires a little in-house training to get into the culture and the dynamics of that particular organization. But the other thing that they want you to have is what are often referred to as the soft skills. So when you talk to employers, they want students who are not only capable in terms of their skill level, but also who have good communication skills. That is, you can write a decent sentence and paragraph or a report, that you have good IT skills so that you can be able to use whatever software and stuff is available, but also they want to make sure that you have good communication skills, not just written skills, but oral skills, and that you're a good team player, and that you can solve problems. Because the industry changes so much, so it's difficult for an institution to say, okay, if you graduate from IT and within the next 6 months to a year, there's a whole new software or a new system, or there are changes that are so happening so rapidly that it's important for young people to be able to pick information quickly and be able to learn and adapt very rapidly.
Africa might not have developed the global standard, but the mindsets that are produced by African institutions have developed economies all over the world.
Skiba William, I'm a Kenyan. I'm graduating with a Bachelor of Business and Information Technology.
I'm Belize Sindaheura. I'm from Burundi. I'm graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Dryland Natural Resource Management.
My campus is my ticket for being a world-class urban planner. Urban planning is a professional course that trains students in the preparation of physical development plans. Basically, SPACE is our mandate as trained professional urban planners. Hi, my name is Olale Philip, graduating class year 2011, University of Nairobi, College of Architecture and Engineering.
We want to be a good student of engineering. Really, a good student of engineering or architect is a student who is focused, well focused from the high school. When they join the university, they must devote themselves to the seriousness of the rigor that is required in to do engineering and architecture.
The world's attention has been caught by this, and it has created a problem for sub-Saharan Africa. The region has a massive brain drain as qualified doctors, nurses, and engineers have migrated to already developed regions to seek better lifestyles and to improve their skills.
Definitely, if you look at the advanced economies, there is going to be a need for qualified people in the future, and this will indeed call for immigration into the job markets of the advanced economies, and that's I think that's a positive trend, because in fact it will contribute to addressing the human capital needs of advanced economies, and it will also indirectly contribute to the transfer of know-how as people from qualified people from sub-Saharan Africa gain work experience in Europe or in the United States. First of all, they will be able to probably achieve higher levels of income and remit part of that income back to their country, which will help promote savings and investment, and they will also accumulate experience which they can then use in their country when they decide to return. So I think migration is a win-win.
It's a win-win.
Yes.
But there is hope, because as they go, more gifted young professionals rise up and replace them. People who are willing to learn and adapt to this environment. This means that sub-Saharan Africa is still ripe with skilled young people that are ready to work and make good returns on any investment. After decades of political struggle, sectarian violence and terrorism, several governments in sub-Saharan Africa have embarked on following concrete development blueprints to achieve the United Nations Millennium Goals and achieve a society without poverty and violence.
There is hope in that people are becoming more politically aware. People are becoming more conscious that the world is becoming a more competitive place to live. So either we change or we perish. Okay? And nature as a way of singling out survival, that when you're faced with impending danger and you have to do something to survive, you will do that thing to survive. So I am particularly encouraged by the democratic systems that we're beginning to see in sub-Saharan Africa. A few years ago, it was unheard of for a ruling party in sub-Saharan Africa to be beaten in elections and to concede defeat. That has been gradually happening in sub-Saharan Africa. In Ghana, the ruling party has been beaten in elections twice and they've conceded defeat. In Zambia, just the other day, the ruling party, a sitting head of state was beaten in elections and he conceded defeat. Okay? In Kenya, a sole election precipitated a political standstill that had to bring about global intervention. So we are beginning to see at least strides towards Africa democratizing. We're also beginning to see strides towards Africa becoming an economic powerhouse. Okay, South Africa is now in the G20. Botswana is a very stable economy. In fact, very many professionals are running away to come and look for employment opportunities in Africa. But one thing that perhaps could propel this change could be the promulgation of an African Union. Okay, if Africa was to unite so that we pool our resources together, we face the global market as a united front rather than very miniature economies that can create a very big difference.
One of the most recognized blueprints is the Kenyan Vision 2030, which directs and controls the main pillars of the Kenyan economy.
Pamoja tufanye kazi na tujijenge, wakilisha, tuendelezane tuinuane, wakilisha, kila siku tuchangie ndoto letu, wakilisha, wakilisha.
We had a vision today. We saw good schools and perfect roads. We saw a Kenya with good hospitals, a Kenya that can feed the world. If we work hard to improve our future, we will live in a better Kenya. Wakilisha Vision 2030. Wakilisha, wakilisha. Wakilisha, wakilisha.
For an investor, there is no area that is important than politics. A quiet, well-organized and sanitized political environment with government policies that allow businesses to thrive. This is the key to attracting foreign direct or indirect investment. Multinational corporations seem to have recognized this secret and are now in the rush to secure the best places in this region to expand their businesses. Sub-Saharan Africa has become a new heaven for those who have discovered her secret and for those who have seen her future. Students from Northwest, Down Under, Southeast Asia and South America are increasingly getting interested in what this region has to offer. There has been an increase in the number of exchange programs offered by academic institutions, giving them this chance.
Well, I was here in 1999. I came to Kenya. And at that time I was, excuse me, I was interested in pursuing photojournalism. Mm-hmm. So I moved through East Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi, and learned that there's more than enough local photojournalists. So in the 6 months I was here, I came to really enjoy the people and the culture, and that it's just very warm, friendly, open, more communal than individualistic as it is in the West.
I was interested in coming to Sub-Saharan Africa because I had lived on the East Coast for the last 10 to 12 years and wanted an opportunity to live in another country. And this was an opportunity for me to come to Kenya because I have some good Kenyan friends who live here, who were born and raised in Kenya, and I wanted the opportunity to have a new experience, and I'm a global person and wanted to have a global perspective. So I decided to take a risk, pack my bags, sell all my things in my New York City apartment, and move to Nairobi.
In simple terms, Sub-Saharan Africa can no longer be ignored and seen as a bushy area with just rugged terrains and beautiful tourist sites. We should be seen as a global business partner. This should not just be for the purposes of manipulation and geopolitical interests by Western powers. We should be seen as the greenest place to create industries and build thriving businesses. After all, companies like Coca-Cola have a billion reasons to believe in Africa.
Forgive me.